Hey there, it's your girl Rose, back with part 2 of the epic manhwa, Existence. If you missed part 1, don't worry, I've got you covered. Just check out the description and you'll be all caught up. Now, let's get into the story. As Jain strolled through the lush green grass, he couldn't help but reflect on the time he spent with his beloved mother. Despite the fact that those moments seemed fleeting compared to the vast expanse of his life, they held an incomparable value in his heart. He felt a deep and infinite love that he had never experienced before, and it filled him with boundless joy. But that happiness was fleeting, just like the time he spent with his mother. She was no longer with him, and the pain of her loss was unbearable. As the beautiful morning sky spread out above him, he couldn't help but feel the weight of her absence. And the anguish of that burden was something he had never experienced before. In his mind, he could hear his mother's voice, urging him to live. And even though she was no longer physically present, her words echoed in his heart. "Okay, Mom," he whispered softly, and he continued on his journey, carrying her memory with him always. A beautiful snowfield, where a skilled hunter has just taken down a magnificent pheasant. With a big smile on his face, he exclaims, "Ha ha ha. There we go." But his great happiness quickly turns to confusion when he spots a young child standing nearby. The boy, whose name is Jain, is staring intently at the bird's lifeless body. He's covered in dirt and his shirt has a hole in it. The hunter is surprised to see a child in the hunting grounds, and quickly realizes the danger. But he also can't help but notice Jain's dirty clothes and the holes in his shirt. Trying to break the tension, he asks if this is the boy's first time seeing a pheasant. Jain nods, and the hunter points out how big the bird is. Jain's tone becomes harsh as he asks, "Are you proud?" With an air of tension, Jain squeezes his left hand and glares fiercely at the hunter, as if attempting to use his powers against him. But to Jain's surprise, the hunter doesn't seem to be bothered by it. Instead, he asks with genuine concern, "Where are your parents?" Jain's anger dissipates, replaced by a sense of sadness as he quietly responds, "They're dead." In that moment, the hunter's face softens, and his expression turns solemn as he feels a deep sympathy for the small, dirty child before him. Realizing that it's winter and that Jain must be cold, the hunter takes off his big coat and puts it on the boy. He also notices that Jain is wearing short sleeves. Jain looks up at the hunter with a red face, feeling both flustered and grateful for the hunter's kindness. The hunter then suggests, "Let's head to my place for now," and holds Jain's small right hand. Jain is confused and shocked, with a super cute red blush on his cheeks and smoke coming from his breath due to the cold. Jain can't help but feel a flutter of warmth in his chest. Maybe this is what it feels like to have a parent's kindness. Jain and the hunter finally arrived at their home, where they were greeted by the hunter's old mother who was waiting outside in the cold. The hunter scolded her for waiting outside and told her to go inside. The hunter then turned to Jain and said that he needed to wash up before they could eat because he smelled bad. After cleaning up, the three of them sat down at the table to eat the cooked pheasant that the hunter had killed. The hunter cheerfully announced that they would be having some soft pheasant meat for dinner and encouraged Jain to join in the meal. However, Jain's face showed a mix of sadness and reluctance as he looked at the cooked pheasant on the table. It was unclear if he was feeling sorry for the bird or if he was just not very hungry. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupts their meal, emanating from a construction site in the nearby mountain. "Ah, it's loud, isn't it? What did they call it? A risotto. Anyways, what brings you all the way out to these mountains?" Jain replied simply, "Just walked here." The hunter looked confused. Anyhow, there's nothing here. It's not the greatest place for a kid to live either. Let's go to the village sometime tomorrow. I'll ask the town chief to find someone who will take care of you. You need to go to school. The hunter patted Jain's head, causing the young boy to make a shocked and cute face. The hunter and his mother were already sleeping, but Jain was still awake. I think it's because the hunter snores so loudly. Ha ha ha. Jain saw the happy family picture of the hunter's family. As far as I remember, Hunter's dad looks like one of the detectives on Men, the team leader that Jain killed. I don't know if Jain remembers it, but whoa, what a plot twist. My mind is still reeling from it. The scene opens with the hunter giving Jain some clothes to wear, but they're too big for him. The hunter folds the clothes and gets them to fit just right. And the hunter calls out to his mother, letting her know that he'll be back soon. The old lady waves goodbye as they walk away. As they walk, Jain makes a comment about the hunter's mother not talking much. The hunter explains that she can't hear very well, but as long as she understands his intentions, that's all that matters. Jain shows a sad face, indicating that he feels sorry for the hunter. It starts to rain, and the hunter realizes that they need to find shelter. They come across a small cave at the end of the construction site, where there are cut trees, an excavator, a small truck, and a small camp. The hunter comments on the rain and wonders why it's raining so much during winter. Suddenly there was a loud noise, splash, as the ground gave way and a landslide occurred. The hunter's body was buried under 3/4 of mud and only his left side and head were visible. The sound of his weak voice filled with pain and panic could be heard. Are you okay? Jain was shocked and worried about the hunter's condition. She ran towards him as fast as she could with her small hands and started to remove the mud. The hunter's voice was filled with desperation. What should I do? Jain replied, just wait. I'll get you out of there. Suddenly, the hunter cried out, my mother, M.O. Jain's heart sank as she realized the severity of the situation. She took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. No. Despite his best efforts, the hunter's body had already become lifeless. Jain looked at the hunter's dead body with a sad face. As the rain poured down, Jain remembered the mountain over there that was going through construction. What did they call it again? Risotto, he mumbled to himself while looking up at the sky. The sound of the rain mixed with his sorrowful emotions made the whole scene even more poignant. As the rain poured down heavily, Jain walked along the deserted street with the weight of the dead hunter's body on his back. Suddenly, he spotted an umbrella ahead and made his way towards it. As he drew closer, he realized it was the hunter's mother, and he bowed his head with a sad expression. The hunter's mother was shocked to see her son's bloodied head and dropped the umbrella in horror. Jain stood outside the hunter's house, and as the rain stopped, memories flooded his mind of the day he killed the men who had tried to kidnap him and his mother. He recalled the 8 lifeless bodies on the ground, the blood, and the day he killed Detective On. To be honest, I was taking anger out on them, Jain muttered as he looked down at his hands. All the humans in this world, not a single one will be left, he remembered saying before taking Detective On's life. He couldn't stop thinking about his decision, and his mind was clouded with uncertainty. A flashback to Jain's childhood with his mother, Youngshil, revealed a conversation they had about trying even if you don't know the answer. Youngshil had encouraged Jain to try his best and learn from his mistakes. Fast forward to the present, and Jain found himself at the opening ceremony of the Jain Resort, owned by Shoma Incorporated. The crowd cheered as the owner of the resort cut the red ribbon. Suddenly, the owner noticed a kid, Jain, walking towards him. The owner was disappointed to see Jain there and wondered why the guards at the entrance hadn't stopped him. As the security approached Jain, he noticed the dead body on Jain's back and was so scared that he fell to the ground. Jain recalled his mother's words about doing what you think is right, even if you're not sure. "I won't hesitate anymore," he declared as he looked at the trembling security guard. "You will all die at my hands. The reason being, because I want to," he added with a piercing gaze. The scene was filled with tension and emotion as Jain's inner turmoil and past experiences collided with his current actions. Jain stood on the outskirts, overlooking the whole city. He observed the constant growth and improvement of the city. He knew that extinction was not easy, but he believed he could do it. However, behind him were a lot of dead bodies, a grim reminder of the harsh realities of life. As the sun set behind the mountain, Jain buried the hunter and the hunter mom who died a few days later, probably due to the shock of seeing her son dying. Jain had a lot on his mind, and he needed to figure out what powers he had. He looked at his right arm and realized that he could call on the powers of all living beings and become anything. The problem was that if he wasn't actively thinking, he would return to the body of an ordinary human. 1 year passed, and Jain stood on the railroad when a train suddenly came. He stepped in, and the operator was shocked. Jain got hit by the train and flew so high in the sky. The train stopped, and the operator got out to check on the child, but he saw nothing. Jain had already walked far away. He tried the power of a corbiculobee's teeth this time, and it was so dangerous. He tries it on the train if it will work. He seemed desperate. Another year passed, and Jain had a cat on his head, and a wild boar, bear, fox, and deer beside him, lying comfortably. He had learned how to communicate with all living beings through telepathy, which was easier than expected. He had a developed sixth sense, and while understanding animals at a basic level helped, it was largely due to his human nature. Jain was amazed as he realized that most living beings on Earth tended to like humans. 5 years passed, and Jain's body had reached adulthood. He was now very handsome, and I couldn't help but fall in love with him. He had accomplished the feat of transforming into a turtle to maintain his body's state. 10 years passed, and Jain saw a factory spewing dark smoke, and the sea was full of plastic waste and dirt. Despite the bleak situation, he noticed a beautiful mountain and sat on the ground. He realized that his communication skill wasn't limited to living beings. When he held the ground with his right palm, he felt that life existed within all of it. He could feel that the earth was suffering and dying. He looked at the whole city again with a lot of tall buildings, and he knew he had a lot of work to do. Jain was able to train for 30 years. He worked tirelessly and pushed himself to his limits, and soon he discovered that there was no end to what he could do. He decided to test his power on a mountain. He focused all his energy and unleashed his abilities, and what happened next was unbelievable. The mountain split into two with a super big hole. WTF. But that was not all. Jain also learned that he could combine his abilities to become even stronger. He felt like he had done all the necessary preparations, and now he was ready to take on anything. With a fierce look in his eye, Jain wondered, should I do it now? Jain had the ability to create earthquakes, but not just any earthquakes that could split continents and consume them in rough seas, resulting in the extinction of the human race. But as Jain was about to unleash this devastating power, something caught his attention. A bird, flying peacefully in the sky. This sight made Jain pause and think about his actions. Sure, humans would not be the only creatures to die if this earthquake were to happen, but Jain still hesitated. He's been alone for decades, and perhaps it was time to see what humans were like now. After all, Jain had good memories of humans from his youth, including his mother and a hunter he once knew. With confidence, Jain reminded herself that there was no need to rush. She could do it whenever she wanted to. Wherever he went, he saw the influence of humans. Even if he tried his best, there wasn't a place where they hadn't spread their reach. He walked barefoot on a road that used to be a forest, reminiscing about the sweet scents of acacia flowers, and Jain was feeling down, disappointed and tired of the human race. He wanted to use his powers to wipe them all out. Suddenly, a car appeared on the road and Jain glared at it with sad eyes. He was annoyed by the horn noises that weren't a part of this world. So, Jain used his power to make the car lose control, causing the road to crack. Just as a big stone was about to fall on the car, the driver shouted in fear. Jain saw his mother's face in the driver and rushed forward to punch the stone, causing it to split in half. The driver was shocked to see Jain's face on the windshield of the car, staring at him like he was crazy. But then, another stone fell from the mountain and hit Jain hard. Ouch! It hurts. Why? Jain wondered. He realized that his powers had stopped because the driver distracted him. The driver looked so much like his mother that Jain had stopped thinking entirely. When he woke up, he was in a hospital with a nurse by his side. "You shouldn't move around like that yet," she said. "You just underwent surgery and are experiencing some pain." Jain was confused. "Surgery?" he asked. The nurse explained that they couldn't find any information on his identity and had proceeded with the surgery without consent from his guardian. They asked for his name, but Jain couldn't remember. The driver and nurse looked at him in confusion, but suddenly, Jain remembered his name. "Li Jain," he said with a smile. "Ah, what a relief." Then the doctor arrived. The doctor, the nurse, and Lisu, the driver of the car, the girl who looks like Jain's mother, gathered around Li Jain, who was sitting on the hospital bed. The doctor states that they don't have information about him and is suffering from memory loss. The nurse confirms it, and the doctor faces Lisu, who showed annoyance, and the doctor said it was quite unfortunate. 3 months later, the police and government worker are discussing Jain's case. They don't have any information on him, and he doesn't have his fingerprints registered. Lisu expresses his frustration and asks what they should do now. The government worker suggests that if Jain had a guardian, things would be easier and done. In the hospital lobby, Jain and Lisu were waiting for the paperwork for Jain's discharge. The nurse called out to them, "Guardian of Li Jain, guardian of Li Jain." Jain looked at Lisu and asked, "Ain't she calling you?" Lisu responded with an annoyed and mad tone, "Yes." It was obvious from his reaction that he was annoyed to suddenly become the guardian of an unknown guy. The nurse asked if they had the paperwork for discharge, and Lisu replied, "Yes." He then filled out the paperwork while looking at Jain with a sad but cute expression. As they walked outside, Jain noticed that Lisu wasn't looking good and asked, "Something wrong?" Lisu glared at Jain and clarified, "Let me reiterate this. It's not my fault. It was a landslide. I do not need to feel responsible or indebted to you for what happened." Jain was confused and asked why Lisu kept saying the same things. Lisu walked closer to Jain and said with a mad but cute face, "Also, apparently you're in your mid-20s. Since it's better the younger you are, I registered you as 24 years old. By the way, I'm 34. Much older, right?" Jain innocently replied, "I thought the younger, the better. What are you going to do now that you're old?" Lisu thought to himself, "This bitch." He scolded Jain for not having manners and offered to teach him, but Jain didn't seem to understand. Jain's estimated age is 3.5 billion years old. As they walked, she told Jain that he would find a place for him to work and that he could stay at the dorm where Lisu was staying while he regained his memories. Once he regained them, he could go. Jain then takes Lisu's hand, causing Lisu to become angry and warn him not to hold someone's hand without asking. Jain was confused but remained innocent, asking if he could hold Lisu's hand. Lisu suggested, "Can you say that more nicely?" Then Jain say it again with a please this time. Lisu reluctantly gave in, and they walked on. As they talked, a sudden memory flashed in Jain's mind, a blurry image of him and his mother walking in a field of sunflowers while holding hands. The memory was so vivid that it brought tears to Jain's eyes. Lisu noticed Jain crying and asked why. Jain was too shocked to answer, not knowing why he was suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. Lights up on a cozy coffee shop, we see Jain and Lisu sitting at a table with Jain's friend Chadon, who is visibly confused by their situation. Chadon's eyes widen in shock as Lisu reveals that they are gonna live together for the time being. Chadon glares suspiciously at Jain, who becomes defensive and asks why she's looking at him like that. Chadon responds with a confused look, not understanding why Jain is so defensive. Lisu takes a sip of his coffee and watches the exchange with amusement, enjoying the drama. Lisu and Chadon stepped outside for a private chat, and things quickly got interesting. Lisu seemed to be unfazed by the fact that Jain, a man with no memory of his identity, was staying at her house. Chadon, however, was skeptical, especially after noticing Jain's unusual dialect. Chadon was not convinced and warned Lisu about the potential danger of letting a stranger into her house. Despite Chadon's warnings, Lisu couldn't help but think of Jain's scary face and lonely crying face, which she had seen before, and think Chadon is not wrong. Then she looks to Jain. Jain noticed Lisu looking at him and flashed them a charming smile, causing Dawn to become flustered. Lisu defended her decision by saying she felt responsible for Jain, and that she had a good feel for things. Chadon suddenly asked, "So what are you feeling right now?" Lisu answered calmly, "He's harmless." Chadon then turned to look at Jain and thought to herself, "He does seem harmless." Dawn was still unsure but realized that he wouldn't be able to convince Lisu otherwise. She then suggested let's do it this way, but not without holding his head in frustration. Lisu speaks to Jain and offers her a room to stay in on the highest floor of the building. But when Jain asks if she can stay with Lisu instead, Chadon interjects with a sharp manners. But Jain can't help but express her desire to stay with Lisu, causing Lisu to coyly replies, "But I don't want to, though," with a playful smile. Jain can't hide her disappointment and looks down, feeling sad. Sensing her emotions, Lisu doesn't hesitate to turn on the charm and says, "Don't just mess around." She reminds Jain that she can stay in the room, and the cafe will even give her a job until she regains her memories. But Jain still looks downcast. With a warm smile, Lisu promises to visit often and asks Chadon to take care of Jain. But before leaving, Chadon wonders aloud why Lisu is leaving so soon when there aren't even any customers. Lisu explains that she needs to head home before returning to the facilities to do some work. Jain is curious and asks, "Facilities?" Chadon is happy to fill her in, telling her that Lisu works at a nice place called the Environmental Industry Facilities. Jain's interest is piqued, and she exclaims, "I want to work there too." Lisu, Chadon, and Jain stepped outside of the coffee shop. Lisu called out to her furry friend, Royce, and as they approached him, he suddenly bolted towards Jain. "Oh! Look at him," Chadon exclaimed in surprise, as Royce snuggled up to Jain, wagging his tail with excitement. "That's weird," Lisu said, her brow furrowed in confusion. Royce never goes to anyone except me. How nice, she thought to herself, admiring Royce's adorable face and wagging tail. But little did she know that this furry friend had a surprise in store for her. As Jain patted the dog on the head, she suddenly felt a strange energy coursing through her body. It was like a surge of power, a shock wave that made her want to scream. Oh, almost vomiting because of the pain. Lisu and Cha Don looked at each other in shock, unsure of what was happening to Jain. But then, Jain heard the sound of a truck approaching, its tires screeching on the road. Suddenly, Royce started barking aggressively, tugging on his leash as he lunged toward the truck. Lisu struggled to hold on to the leash as Royce continued to bark ferociously, his eyes fixed on the truck. Royce! Stop that! Calm down! What's wrong? Trying to calm the dog. That car. Jain trailed off, her voice tinged with curiosity. Huh? Lisu asked, looking at Jain with a puzzled expression. It's one of the facility's cars? Jain wondered aloud. Lisu shrugged. What about that car? She asked, as the vehicle passed in front of them. Little did they know, Jain's senses were about to kick into overdrive. As a dog's sense of smell is 1,000 times better than a human's, Jain suddenly found herself borrowing the abilities of a dog. It was an unusual sensation, but it allowed her to sense something that even Lisu couldn't see. An unnatural living being, unknown to Jain, was inside the car. It was an organism born of the bottomless greed of humans, and even Jain, who was currently amnesiac, could sense its presence. The living being inside the car was emanating an overwhelmingly intense emotion, a deep and hostile feeling towards the human race. Thanks for tuning in for this manhwa recap. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more recaps and reviews. Let me know in the comments which manhwa you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video.